Welcome back to The Explainer. Have you ever wondered how on earth you actually film an invisible sense? Well, if you have, you're definitely in the right place today. We're diving into the wildly complex adaptation of Patrick Süskind's legendary 1985 novel, Perfume, The Story of a Murderer. And honestly, this isn't just your standard behind-the-scenes look at a movie making of. We're going on a fascinating journey that intersects cinema, deep history, and some incredibly dark philosophy. So let's get into it. Our structure today is kind of going to mimic the layers of a complex fragrance. We'll be moving through 1. Filming the unfilmable. 2. A murderous olfactory quest. 3. Capturing smell on screen. 4. The decadent antihero. 5. The dark side of science. And finally, 6. A polarizing aromatic legacy. Okay, let's dive into Section 1. Filming the unfilmable, a 15-year Hollywood mirage.
So, Patrick Süskind, the author, originally believed that only brilliant cinematic masters, we're talking guys like Stanley Kubrick or Milos Forman, could possibly do his book justice. But Kubrick? He famously dashed those hopes. He reportedly took one look at the material and flat out declared the invisible sense of smell entirely unfilmable. And I mean, think about it. Capturing something that relies completely on the nose, using absolutely nothing but celluloid and sound, it just seemed like an impossible paradox. Still, you know how it goes. The property was an absolute goldmine. The book had sold over 20 million copies worldwide and was translated into 50 languages. Because of that, massive Hollywood icons orbited this project for years. Martin Scorsese, Tim Burton, Ridley Scott, they were all linked to it at some point. Finally, after a 15-year struggle, Süskind relented in the year 2000, selling the rights for a rumored 10 million euros. Ultimately, it was acclaimed German director Tom Tykwer who took the hot seat to adapt the impossible.
That brings us to Section 2, a murderous olfactory quest, the scent of a killer. Let's transition to the bizarre, really visceral narrative of the story itself.
Imagine literally being born into the raw, bloody, overpowering stench of an 18th century Parisian fish market. Well, that's day one for our protagonist, Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, and he is entirely unique. He's born with absolutely no personal human odor, yet he possesses this superhuman, almost terrifying sense of smell. He literally views the entire world exclusively through scent. We follow his dark milestones, from learning technical formulas under an aging perfumer named Giuseppe Baldini, to this bizarre 7-year period of total isolation in a remote mountain cave where he just revels in his cataloged memories of smells. Eventually, he arrives in Grasse, the perfume capital, to undertake a truly sinister mission. In Grasse, Grenouille's obsession reaches its chilling climax. He wants to capture the abstract scent of human innocence. To do this, he goes on a killing spree, targeting 24 young virgin women. He then uses a very real historical perfume technique called cold enfleurage on their corpses to perfectly preserve their bodily scents. It's incredibly dark, and it all culminates in the murder of his final victim, Laure Ricious, so he can synthesize these extractions into the ultimate intoxicating perfume. So how on earth do you actually put that on screen? Let's move to Section 3, capturing smell on screen, filth, fish, and 50 million euros. Well, to pull this off, the production required a staggering budget of 50 million euros. To put that in perspective, at the time of its production, this made Perfume the most expensive German film ever made. They absolutely needed that money to completely recreate the genuine, overwhelming grime and grit of the 18th century. Now, what's really interesting about this practical approach is that the crew deliberately avoided relying on CGI. Instead, they actually employed a 60% dirt unit. Yes, a dirt unit whose sole job was just to distribute detritus over the city sets to make them look filthy. They literally dumped 2.5 tons of raw fish and 1 ton of meat right into Barcelona's Gothic quarter to recreate that Parisian fish market. And for the film's climax, where the townspeople smell Grenouille's perfect perfume and are driven into an absolute frenzy, they used 750 extras for a massive execution orgy. They wanted the imagery to be so optically precise and raw that your brain would naturally just conjure up the smells. But you know, not everyone was entirely convinced by the visual execution. The German weekly newspaper Die Zeit published a rather humorous critique, playfully ridiculing the movie as big nose theater. They actually counted and pointed out that to convey the act of smelling, the director relied on extreme, literal close-ups of the protagonist's nose no fewer than 27 times. For some critics, it was just a bit too literal of an attempt to bridge the gap between screen and scent.
All right, let's shift gears here for section 4, the decadent anti-hero, artifice over morality. We are moving from behind-the-scenes movie trivia to a deep academic analysis of what this story is really saying about art, humanity, and philosophy. The crucial point here is understanding the academic framework of the story, which is deeply rooted in decadence. Decadence was a late 19th century literary movement that completely countered societal norms. It emphasized perversity, artificiality, and the extreme pursuit of artistic perfection, totally at the expense of natural morality. And Grenouille, he is the ultimate decadent protagonist. He is isolated, highly egotistical, and totally willing to use perverse, murderous means, again, killing 25 women, just to achieve a fleeting artificial masterpiece of ascent. It's literally art for art's sake, taken to a horrifying extreme.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict of the entire narrative, Grenouille's decadent artifice clashing against the traditional backdrop of Enlightenment science that defined the 18th century. The Enlightenment championed the reason-driven pursuit of objective truth and knowledge. Grenouille learns the rational science of perfumery, sure, but he completely warps it, using meticulous scientific methods to achieve his horrific artistic obsession.
Which brings us to section 5, the dark side of science, an allegory for atrocity. Academics are quick to point out that the Enlightenment motto was dare to know, right? It was a call to push the boundaries of science. But the thesis here is, what happens when that's taken to the absolute extreme? When the pursuit of science for the sake of science completely overshadows ethical concerns, it leads to disaster. In this analysis, Grenouille serves as a potent symbol for hubristic experimentation, utterly detached from humanity. His cold, calculating extraction of human scent represents a total disregard for human life in the name of technical perfection. And the author, Patrick Suskind, actually spoke directly to this. In a 1986 interview with the New York Times, he stated, "The Third Reich was for my generation always in the back of our minds." Academic analysis notes that post-Hitler German literature frequently wrestled with the enduring trauma of unethical scientific extremes and monomaniacal leaders who somehow mesmerized the masses. Suskind basically designed a narrative about a terrifying figure who hypnotizes a crowd, really exploring how the drive for excellence, when detached from ethics, can be used to justify barbaric acts.
Let's wrap up today with section 6, a polarizing aromatic legacy, the final drop.
Let's move over to the box office to see how this all builds up, because the numbers reveal a massive cultural divide. In Germany, the film was a monumental, record-breaking success, raking in over $53.1 million. It was widely hailed as a visually lush triumph. But in the United States, it barely scraped together $2.2 million. It completely lost its way during the American holiday release. Some U.S. critics found the visual focus on filth and a murderous anti-hero entirely repulsive. It's just a fascinating split in global cinematic tastes.
So that leaves us with one final, lingering question to ponder today. When you look at the immense practical effort, the 50 million euros spent, the 27 extreme nose close-ups, and all that deep philosophical subtext, did director Tom Tykwer successfully capture the invisible sense of scent on celluloid? Or, as Stanley Kubrick originally believed, are some stories simply meant to remain purely in the realm of our imagination? It's a pretty profound thought on the limits of cinema and the power of the written word. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.